The Power Factor Show. Episode 102.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Sponsored by Hodgton, the Gunpowder People.
Right. So we've talked a lot about incidents in which people were DQed.
Maybe we should
talk about why. What is the reasoning behind disqualification?
Well, I was going to say one thing that we probably ought to mention here is when a DQ, not a DQ.
That's a good one, yeah.
Because I think that the biggest, the most likely cause of when a DQ is not a DQ is there's a provision in the rule book which basically says that a DQ is when you are during movement while not engaging a target.
Right.
Okay. So this gets really gray. And I should say that the very first DQ that I issued was at a Area 1 championship in Missoula that I was working as a fairly new RO. And we had a wall, which actually created a lot of problems because the wall was right in the 180 and we had people moving down the wall with their gun on the 180. But the problem is we had nobody that was there in a position to actually call it. So what we ended up doing, this is somewhat dangerous, but we took the assistant RO, the paper guy, and put him literally in just slightly back in line down range to start calling these problems because I saw, being the main RO right behind the guy, the CRO, I can't really tell if he is or is not.
Right.
So at any rate, kid's going along down the wall, there's ports there, he shoots targets through the port, starts moving down range, fires a round off right into the wall. Clearly, there's no way you can justify that you were engaging targets.
It's like when I should have gotten DQ'd. I'm shooting walls.
Yeah, so that was clearly a DQ.
Right.
Later on during the day, just down from that wall, there was two low targets, kind of in a pit, like a little mini wall that you look over, and then two more targets that you're going to shoot beyond that. Guy goes in, shoots those two targets, turns, looks down range, guns over here, fires around. Okay. Didn't call it. Why did I not call it? Because he could have argued, because the thing is, while not engaging targets, there's no restriction or rule that says you have to be looking at the targets when you shoot them. I've shot at targets without looking. It's like, you go blam, 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 like that. I know where the target is. I'm trying to get out of there quick. So there's no requirement that you have to be looking. There's a requirement you have to be accurate. What happened is this round went off and hit the lath, the target stake or whatever, went through that and actually hit part of the prop for one of the walls or whatever. But the thing is, it was probably a DQ, but I knew that if I called him on a DQ, all you have to do is arb and say, I was shooting at the target, there's nothing that says I need to look at it. Yep. Didn't call it. I've seen issues where DQs have been given where people, in reality, it is a DQ, probably, or an AD. They did not intend to shoot the target, but the way the rules are set up, it says basically, again, shots fired while moving, not engaging targets. Well, movement is defined as taking more than a step in a direction or changing shooting position, kneeling to standing, sitting to standing, whatever. So if the shooter is there and doesn't take more than a step and fires around and it goes down range, whether they're looking at it or not, it's not a DQ. But I've seen people called for DQs in that, and you go off and you look in the rule book and see what it says. Is one or more, it's more than one step. You can take one step and still be within the rule. It's two steps that would get you in trouble. Yep. And I've seen people called on DQs of, they stand, they do something, yes, the gun goes bang, it goes down range, and somebody calls one a DQ, and it's not a DQ, per the rule book. In reality, yes, it is probably an AD. I don't think they meant to do that. But the way the rules are written, there's no justification for defining it as a DQ. So, which is not to say that you should go off and try to make
ADs,
use of what I just said, saying, try to use it.
Try to make all your shots intentional.
Right, yeah. So, Rick, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that, we discussed when we've been DQ'd and why we were DQ'd, but what are the rules?
What are the circumstances
surrounding why are people disqualified? I'd say unsafe gun handling is.
It all boils down.
Accidental. There's three in USPSA.
It all boils down to safety violations.
Yeah, accidental
one
discharge
form or
is
another.
Unsafe gun handling or unsportsmanlike conduct.
Have you ever seen an unsportsmanlike conduct DQ?
Well, actually, I issued an unsportsmanlike
really?
conduct.
Really? You tried?
Yes, yeah.
So
that might be a future episode.
So yeah, like you said, the general headings are accidental discharge, unsafe gun handling, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Rick, what are the DQable offenses under the current IDPA rulebook?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, you've got
muzzle safe points.
Well, muzzle safe points, yeah. Like in USPSA competition, you break the 180 with your muzzle, you're done. In IDPA, you might have a shooting area that's greater than 180 degrees,
or much less.
Or much less, exactly. And so you could have a situation where all of your rounds are expected to be fired within a 45-degree cone, and you get your muzzle a little bit outside of that, and you could go home. Or you could have a situation where you could sweep your gun through 270 degrees and you're fine, because the way the thing is set up, that's just the way the stage is designed. So you got your muzzle safe points that you have to worry about that may be dramatically more or dramatically less than the 180 degrees, which was in USPSA is kind of universally considered the safe direction to point your muzzle. But then you've also got circumstances with a dropped gun and things like that. The IDPA safety officers have much more discretion than USPSA range officers, especially in the case of a dropped gun. There's situations where safety officer could rule that no, that dropped gun's okay. Pick it up,
Wow.
dust it off. And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I mean, it just depends on the circumstances. I mean, like I might argue that if the gun falls out of my holster and it's unloaded, what has it been a danger to anybody? Did I knock it out or did it just fall out? That kind of thing. And so it's just like I said, the safety officer has more discretion than in USPSA.
Well, so in USPSA though, you've got if the gun's dropped outside of the course of fire, then it's not a DQ
as long as you don't pick it up yourself.
You try to pick it up yourself. You just need to stand there and go, help.
I actually saw that happen. A friend of mine had his gun come out of his holster during the walkthrough, and he was bending over to pick it up, and like Fiverr's like, don't touch it. And he's like, what do you mean don't touch it? I'm like, no, really, if you touch it, you'll get DQ'd.
Actually, that happened to me with my race holster when I had my fancy new SV. One of the first matches I ever shot with it 6 years ago or something like that. Shot the stage, everything, unload, show clear, range is clear, bend over to pick up the round before I was catching it.
Like a boss.
and bumped it out of the holster, and I was like, oh, Gary, my gun's on the ground. Help me.
And I hate to say it though, but on the drop gun thing is that if you knock a gun, and it's almost like we're talking about the same thing we talked about before, but from my standpoint, if I knock a gun out of my holster and I know that I'm doing it, gun in the air, I hate to say it, but I will take the DQ on it because I don't want to scratch my gun. I will try to trap it. I either catch it with my foot, catch it with my hand, pin it, do something. I've never done it.
Well, actually, the rule book allows you to trap it.
No, it doesn't.
But you have to then lower it to the ground and then ask for help.
No, they changed. They said that's not in the rule book. It's in one of the provisions for 2013 that they said basically if a gun gets knocked out of a holster, that trapping it with your hand or whatever is considered handling, and therefore will be a DQ.
So if you drop your gun, if you knock your gun out of your holster, you're not supposed to try to catch it.
Should not.
That's why you should just shoot blocks. You don't care if those fall.
Yeah.
So kind of to drive on this topic, we've all either seen, issued, or been DQ'd, and I think that there's definitely different ways for the shooter to handle DQs. Because I've seen guys, I issued a DQ at a match once where the guy, was shouting about it and he stormed off and, just took his ball and went home. Mm-hmm. And I was okay with that because he was a dick. But what do you guys feel like good DQ etiquette is?
Well, I think what DQs is yes, there's what happens immediately after the DQ, and then there's the long-term effect of what do you learn from it. And I guess we should probably talk about the immediate effects of DQ, and then the long-term what you do with the information. A lot of people usually interpret DQ as I'm done, I go home, that's it.
Finished.
Right, I'm finished. Right.
Which maybe it's somewhere to be. So go ahead.
But the thing is, I think from the standpoint of you're there with your friends, you're there to have fun, and just saying, okay, I'm going to go home and quit, is not a really good thing to do. It doesn't set the right tone, and I think what was better is okay, fine, I screwed up, I realized that, but I'm not going to basically take my ball and go home. I'm going to stick around and I'm going to help reset the stages, help tape targets, stuff like that. You know, I think people have a lot more respect for somebody who sticks around and continues to help, as opposed to, well, I just blew my day, I'm going to go home and, you know,
For sure.
Watch football.
Right.
Well,
I
I
do
think
think-
I was gonna say it depends too on is the shooter accepting of the fact that they screwed up.
Right.
Because the shooter who accepts, yes, I screwed up, is much more likely to say,
Stick around.
stick around, just go, you know, it's almost like you're doing your time.
Right.
Hanging around, you know, absorbing the fact that you've been disqualified and you're not allowed to shoot anymore. But then some people, their natural reaction is they're so...
We're picking on you. And
Yeah.
He's done me wrong.
Yeah, and they storm
Right.
off, and that's part of the last...
And the important
say
thing,
having the
like
last
this,
word.
screw
kind of
you,
thing.
yeah.
and the
Right.
important thing to remember is that you've earned
Whatever.
Yeah,
you've
and,
earned that
and
disqualification.
that's a good point. Is that, I mean,
And
you'll
so-
hear a lot of ROs say, you know, I really don't want to, you know, give somebody a DQ, or I hate doing that, or I feel bad doing that.
I
Well,
do.
the thing is, I mean, you do. You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
like doing it.
I don't want to
But the
end
thing
your
is,
fun.
the RO did not do the DQ. The person
Right.
who did the DQ did the DQ, and I mean, you know, it's
The RO is
on
just
them. It's
enforcing
not
the
on
rules.
exactly. It's on the person who did it, not on the RO who's reporting it.
I do think
And from a standpoint, if you're an RO, you know, it's not fun to DQ somebody, but on the other hand, if you let somebody continue doing something over and over and over that is a DQ offense, going, well, okay, you broke the 180, you went 185, just watch it or whatever. Newer
Eventually-
shooters, that's understandable. You call them on muzzle, you call them on finger, or whatever. But if you got somebody who's an experienced shooter and they're breaking 180s or doing stuff like that, if you don't point it out to them in a club match, and then they go to a major match and they got into this thing where they're overswinging targets, they will get called on it there,
Yep.
and that will blow a major match for them.
Right.
So it's better to catch it at an early level
Sure, and
than to
correct
let it
that
exactly
behavior
than to
early.
let it go on. And keep on doing the same thing over, and then they get caught at the nationals or whatever, and
Well,
blow
and
it.
same goes for equipment violations too. Catch it early. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
maybe it's not
Especially in
DQable.
IDPA.
Maybe it's not DQable, but if you've got your holster in the wrong position, too far forward in production, and hey, welcome to open,
Right.
Yeah.
that's what happens officially at
Right.
a level 3, level 2 match. But let's get that going at the level 1 match as well.
Yeah.
And correct those behaviors at the low levels.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
think one thing for post DQ behavior that I advocate, and this is partly because I'm a really competitive guy. I've got a type A personality, and I know when I'm out at matches, even if it's a club match, I'm going hard and I want to win. And for whenever I've gotten in a situation where I've gotten a penalty or whatever that has affected my overall match performance, or when I've seen guys who are like me get DQ'd, I always want to advocate for, stick around, tape and paste, but go sit in your car for
Yes.
5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Go cool, because even if you screwed up, there's going to be 5 or 10 minutes where you're going to be jacked up on adrenaline. You might be pissed off at, you're going to be pissed off at somebody, either yourself or the RO or your stupid piece of crap holster or whatever it was that happened. So take 5 minutes, go have a cigarette, go drink some water, do whatever you got to do, so when you come back and you're helping taping, you're not dragging down the rest of the squad.
That's really good advice, because for me, like my first 3 DQs we talked about, that was equipment stuff. It's just equipment stuff, That was the equipment's fault. But my last one, the 180, that was me. I did that. I did something unsafe, and I was a little bit shaken by that, and I continued to actually IRO'd for the rest of the day, and maybe I should have taken 15 minutes before grabbing the timer right
no,
away.
because what will happen,
So-
I think, is that, okay, it happened, and then you'll go home, but you're still constantly replaying that event.
Yeah,
And I think that's the
exactly.
point is that we should take away from this, is that after a DQ, there's the immediate what you do after it, but there's also the long term of using it as a learning experience.
Right, yeah, teachable
You know,
moments.
exactly, is that you go home and your mind will start replaying that through your head of what you did, and then you can start modifying your technique so that you don't do that again.
Right.
And maybe it means that you're not going to be as aggressive or pushing, if it's a 180 situation where you were charging targets,
Right.
you go, okay, that being the case, I'm going to try to engage these targets a little further uprange where I'm not as close to the 180.
Or stop shooting from right
Yeah,
to left.
exactly.
There you go, from left
Stop-
to right
stop
as a
trying to
right-hander.
engage targets
So,
on the 180 line.
Take a look
Yeah.
again at episode 100, and I don't know, it looked pretty close to me, but it wasn't called. So
Yeah.
Well, and
yeah.
there's another issue, and this doesn't really affect USPSA, because in USPSA, as near as I understand, if your gear isn't legal for that division, you get bumped to open.
absolutely.
In IDPA, if
no
your
other
gear's not
place
legal
for
for
you.
that division, you get a DNF. Generally speaking. Depending on that's the problem. Depending on the match, you might get moved into ESP if your gear is legal.
The relevant
for that.
division.
But it's usually the positioning of the gear that's the problem. And if it's in the wrong position, you're DQ'd. I mean, you're done.
And that takes us back to the also the 43 ounce CDP gun question that we had last year. But one of the things to think about for IDPA shooters, especially, is get your gear checked at club matches. Because I've seen guys who have shown up to state level and higher matches, and they do. IDPA has gotten better about this in that they'll have stage one of all the IDPA majors I shot last year. Stage one, they did an equipment check on your first stage for every shooter. It was stand up, do the IDPA airplane, give us a little twirl on the catwalk, and we'll check all your gear, make sure everything's copacetic. Your gear placement's good to go. But that doesn't always happen. And I can't imagine anything worse than going through, 5 stages at, you flew to Carolina for IDPA Nationals, you go through 5 stages, and they do their gear check on the 6th stage, and the whole match you had your holster too far forward. Yeah. And they're like...
We had a guy shoot our state champion, and one of the problems at IDPA, because equipment and the location is so important, is that you're wearing a garment that's covering it.
Right.
And so you could have somebody wearing illegal gear for the whole day, and you'd never know it. And we had a guy, it had come down, it was a state championship match, we'd probably already shot 12 or 13 or 14 stages. Somebody noticed the guy had it on a 2-part USPSA belt.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of those things where as long as the gun, is not offset too far from his body, I don't know, the fact that the belt is made out of 2 pieces of material really conveys any kind of an advantage.
Competition gear.
Well, it is, but I'm just like...
Well, it also does say in the rules that the belt has to pass through your belt loops.
Right, I mean, but it's like most of the equipment rules are to avoid somebody from getting an advantage from using cheater gear. And unless the gun is being held in some illegal position by this 2-part belt, does it really matter whether the belt is 1 part or 2 parts or 7 parts? It's a belt holding the gun together. And back in the day, and I'm talking like 3 years ago, as match director, my kind of philosophy was I don't want anybody to get DQ'd.
Right.
If I can find a way, to save this person's match, like I put their gun on the scale and it weighs an ounce too much. They've already shot 2 stages. I go, if you can get that gun legal before you leave chrono, you're okay. What I should have done is
I was going to say, is that really right? Because whether you do or don't agree that an overweight gun is going to give you an advantage, that's kind of like saying in racing, okay, well, you go out and use this illegal fuel, but as long as like the last 2 laps you're doing illegal stuff, then we're going to forget about the fact that you're in the lead by 30 seconds over everybody else.
It is somewhat similar to that.
Yeah.
Except
super cooled fuel.
Except it's usually in a situation where somebody has no clue how much their gun weighs,
right.
As opposed to somebody who's a masterclass shooter who thinks they're going to win because their gun's announced to them.
As a note on that, kitchen scales are cheap, people. Buy one.
Yeah, but are they
calibrated? But anyway, so the guy's got on a 2-part belt, and it's one of those things where if you don't, you could get to the very end of a match. I mean, I remember I shot a match where the only guy on our squad who failed chrono was shooting factory 9mm. He didn't make minor in production, and he found out after he shot the last stage of the match that he failed chrono.
Oh.
And so he had no idea he was cheating the whole time, Steve.
Yeah.
But they caught him, and they sent him home.
Yeah. Well, the rules were a bitch, but they're in place for a reason. So,
Because and the thing is, that guy.
Gotta draw a line somewhere.
And it sucks for the guy who buys and gets a bad lot of ammo that's underloaded or something like that. But at the same time, it's in place because there are people, and we don't like to talk about it, but there are people in any competitive endeavor who, if the power factor is 125 and they know there's not going to be a chrono at that match, and they feel like loading to 115 makes their gun shoot softer, they'll load to 115. There
was a local shooter who, when he shot major, he would literally, I never experienced this. This is storytelling time. He would alternate rounds in his mag so that he would have major power ammo when he engaged steel and minor power ammo when he engaged paper. So he'd come up to the stage and go pop, 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 bam, pop, 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 blam, blam, pop, pop, pop. So that thinking that he would get enough of a benefit from shooting minor on all the paper targets that he would actually benefit that way. And he apparently had 2 complete sets of mags in his bag. so that if they were going to come around and take a round for chrono off your
God.
belt, he'd put the major power mags on. And
That's just too much work.
And somebody
I got
told
other
me
things to do.
they would have a rule in place that said you will pass through chrono and you will make yourself available for random chrono if called upon.
Mm-hmm.
They would rando chrono this guy 2 or 3 times during the match, and every time his ammo would make power factor. But they said you could just tell by listening that the rounds that were being shot at paper.
See, I just assume that
major
people like
power
that are
factor.
shitty reloaders,
Yeah,
and they have
could be.
inefficient
right.
quality control.
But imagine if you had a mic.
Those are the guys that have the
took a
bullet stuck
makeup
in the
shot.
target.
Then
Right,
you'd be
and
all,
you're-
you'd
it's
be
all
off.
messed up.
Yeah,
Well, and
messed
it's
up.
so, and not to get too far afield from the DQ discussion, but there's definitely, I'm willing to go, to the extremes of the rules. So IDPA says my gun, the trigger guard of my gun has to be on the center line of my leg, wherever the center line of my leg is. I usually
Right there in the middle.
Yeah, I usually use
seam.
the seam of my trousers as a
Right.
good indicator.
Right.
So I will make sure that the trigger guard of my gun is right on the center line of my leg. I will go as far as the rules are willing to allow me, but stuff like that's just like, that's more work than
like
just
spin-
shooting honest,
Right. Spend your efforts somewhere else where it'll really
Maybe
give
if you
some
dry
gains.
fired more instead of learning the super secret
Right.
mag loading procedure.
right.
That's just crazy talk, though.
What happens
I
when
would
someone
I
else
load
also-
the mag backwards.
What you were defining is also a bit hearsay too. I mean,
What's
it
that?
was the issue with this particular.
Well, the
person
fact that he was
all-
never caught would suggest that he wasn't doing that at all, right?
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe
if
he
somebody's
was just
doing-
bad
if
at
And
somebody's
reading.
doing
that's why I
surprise-
prefaced it with this is story time. I
It's
didn't.
a surprise chrono. I mean, that unless they're really super duper gamey, and figure that one out.
Yeah.
But whenever you get chrono, the RO has the ability to come and go, I want this ammo and
Yeah.
that ammo and this ammo, not give me 8 rounds. Okay,
Right.
here's my special 8 rounds to give to you.
Right.
So the fact that you were like saying that this person had been surprise chrono numerous times and passed every time would lead me to believe that they
Maybe
were
he-
probably
just bad at reloading.
yeah, could be,
Pop, boom!
yeah, or maybe somebody has.
So
something
another
in for 'em.
story,
Yeah.
if we're just going to relate stories about DQing.
Sure.
Everything we've talked about so far has been ADs, breaking the 180, guns falling out of holsters. A friend of mine who shoots IPSC now, not USPSA, shoots IPSC up in Canada, BC, tells me that the single most DQs are a result of moving with the finger in the trigger guard.
Okay.
And I have literally never even witnessed a DQ for that in the United States, anywhere.
I've seen people do it and not get DQ'd.
Yeah.
Right. And I've even seen people at USPSA matches yell finger, which is not really a USPSA range command. But I mean, I just thought it was interesting that in 15 years of USPSA competition, I've never seen anyone DQ'd for it. But apparently in British Columbia, IPSC, it's the most common reason.
Well,
that
maybe the
people get
Americans are just better at getting their finger.
Yeah.
up there.
Or we're laser at calling it. I've got photos of. I literally have to throw out match photos sometimes of shooters where they'll start off and everything's good, and then they're coming in hot to a box, and they're not shooting. They're not in the shooting position. They're not engaging targets, but their fingers on the trigger like here, and then the gun comes out and they start shooting. And
But
I'm
that's
like,
okay.
Well, yeah, and that's the
Again,
thing.
it's finger in the trigger guard during movement, and if you're not taking a step or changing position,
Right.
there's no movement.
Well,
so you can have the finger in the trigger guard.
These are like I should bring some of these photos because these are like in the middle of running, and the finger is
Well, that's
in
a
the trigger
problem,
guard.
yeah.
But you got to throw those photos out because if I post them on the internet, I'll get 463 emails. People be like, their fingers on the trigger guard.
Yeah.
No kidding.
I posted something on a forum. We were talking
That
about
was your first mistake.
watching match videos, and it was like the 1991
yeah.
USPSA Championship. So it's all the big names of people who were big names 20 years ago,
Sure.
and a lot of cross draw holsters, and so maybe it's 25 years ago. And these guys were starting facing uprange with the wrists above their shoulders.
Yeah.
And I'm watching these videos, and those guns are coming out of a
Clear
holster
and
when the muzzle's
super
pointed
early,
directly
yeah.
uprange. And it's a matter of 2 or 3 frames in the video. I mean, it's.
But still, yeah.
And I just posted something about it related to how come we can't use cross-draw holsters anymore. And I said, I was watching this match video, and I probably said, this guy, and this guy on the video all broke the 180 on the start. And some guy helpfully replies, I forwarded your email to one of the
Those
shooters,
guys.
and here's his comment on it, and I'm like going 25 years later,
He
he
remembers,
really
yeah.
cares about it,
Yeah.
But I just thought it was kind of funny that that it was like this, like character assassination on a forum of a professional, well-known championship shooter. He cannot go unpunished, kind of a thing. And I'm just like, look, I'm just pointing out that people are breaking rules in sport They should, and when they're caught, they should get the punishment they deserve. Yada yada yada. I'm not calling somebody out for having cheated their way through their shooting career, but it was just kind of, I thought it was a weird response that it was almost like rushing to the person's defense rather than going, yeah, even a championship shooter sometimes breaks the 180.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then you have the good buddy not DQ.
Oh, jeez. Steve's had some interesting experiences with that.
Which is where, for people not familiar with that, that's where the RO and the shooter are very good friends, and the shooter commits. And this isn't like you break the 180 and you're at like a 181 or something like that. This is an egregious violation of the rules that everyone in the peanut gallery sees, and we're all expecting a DQ to happen, and then it mysteriously never does.
Right.
And maybe there's like a shoulder hand conversation, but and that goes back to the, if they don't get DQ'd for it at the club level match, they're eventually going to do it at a championship match, and then they're going to be all butthurt.
Yeah.
I definitely would not be accused of that. I've DQ'd my best friend before.
Good job.
Yes.
For a 180, which is arguably a subjective call, but that's something that we were talking about. We feel bad about dishing out the DQ and handing out the DQ.
I DQ'd my girlfriend.
But that's like...
Oh, that's...
that was a fun
I
conversation.
will not comment what things I could say after.
But as we're taught, you be really, really sure
She DQ'd
of
me
the
later.
DQ.
That reminds me of the Jack in the Box commercial where the guy and his girlfriend are doing Scrabble. No nookie, what's that mean?
Yeah, no, let's just say that I may have DQ'd her from the match. I got DQ'd later, too, so it was even.
My favorite was the guy who DQ'd somebody and then allowed them to keep shooting.
Wait, what?
Oh, yeah.
Just their score wouldn't count.
Yeah.
Right.
Wait, no, that's not how the DQ works.
No, it did in this case.
And that actually came
And I
up
think it
recently.
had something to do with that Burger King commercial.
I
It
was
related
going to
to
say,
that
I
in a
know
way.
who you're talking about, and I know who you're talking about. So, that was...
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things is that the DQ, and then there's also the stage DQ.
Right.
I've heard people talk about that
What the
before.
hell is a stage DQ?
Well,
Apparently there used
doesn't
to be.
exist.
Apparently it used to.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know. Where you have a bad stage and you don't get to keep playing that one, but then
you can
you
come
can
back
come back
one.
and shoot the next one. Yeah, so you would hurt your score for a stage rather than.
But you could still come back maybe and,
It's like Cat of Nine Lives.
Yeah.
So
Power through
actually,
the
it
rest
was
of the
the Kitsap match that we reviewed on episode 100 that a guy DQ'd, and that the question was, well, can I still play for no score? And I said, no, you cannot.
Yeah.
no safety
That's-
violation.
it's considered a
You need to-
timeout.
yeah,
for
you
the
need to
day.
go
Yeah.
to take a timeout. Yeah,
And I think that's one thing is that it's not a humiliating thing, and don't take it personally.
Depends on who's dishing them out.
Right.
Well, yeah.
I am
But
quite
I mean,
the dick
the-
when I issue a DQ.
The thing is
I
that
giggle.
don't let it bust your ego. If it happens to you, don't let it bust your ego. Don't get upset about it. Use it as a learning experience. Replay it again in your mind after the fact or whatever happened. Modify your technique if you need to. And like in your case with your holster, you had to go out and figure out what you were doing with your holster while either why the holster wasn't retaining it,
mechanical
or
issue.
why you weren't getting it in the holster or whatever.
Yeah.
You change your process and then move forward.
And that actually brings me back around to our producer's DQ with the revolver, and something, it takes guts to post that online. And I actually give him credit now, and I did when he did it, that it takes guts to post your own screw up online like that and say, here's what I did wrong, look at my mistake, laugh, have fun with it, but at the same time, to be able to own your mistakes like that, if you DQ and it's on video, don't be ashamed of it, post it and say, look, I made this mistake, this was unsafe, this is what I did that was wrong, and maybe, but I guess what I'm trying to say, maybe you don't want to post it online, that's fine, don't hide from it, because if you try to hide from your mistake, you're never going to learn anything from it,
Yeah, I think I'd pixelate my face before I posted it.
Sure.
Here's
Yeah.
somebody DQing.
Look at this guy shooting 1911 left-handed from a leather holster who's really tall.
Yeah.
Who could that be?
Right.
Well,
All right. Do we
ran the
have?
gamut.
I think that's about. Anybody got anything else for DQs?
I think that pretty much covers everything.
You guys want to talk about some
We
trivia
DQ'd
questions?
everybody. Yeah, we have one.
Who's got one? Who's got an idea?
I don't know offhand.
Do we have a DQ question? Maybe you have a scenario. Should the person be DQ'd or
Well,
not?
wow, I could think about that cheating
Let's
episode that I was
see.
involved in, but I'm not going to go there.
Yes.
Oh, he's got the rule
Well,
book.
given our recent,
I just did my CRO or my RO exam. I can't think of any of the questions I have that would. But what's interesting though, one of my questions in my RO exam was one of your trivia questions, which was how much of the A zone has to remain visible.
cool.
I was like, well, no, I just saw this on Power Factor.
look at that.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve learned something on Power Factor Show.
So is there something in there that's worth a question?
Man, 10.7.3 is one that I'm curious how we're gonna apply that one, given our new
What is
state
10.7.3?
law of legalized.
Oh, yes. That's an interesting thing here. For those of you that haven't heard about the brouhaha, states of Washington and Colorado legalized possession of marijuana.
And recreational use.
Yeah. So 10.7.3 is except when used for medicinal purposes, competitors and officials at matches must not be affected by drugs, including alcohol,
Right.
of any sort during matches. Any person, well, it looks like it's still covered.
It's the same thing. It's like alcohol.
affected,
Alcohol's legal.
affected by
Yeah.
drugs.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't say illegal drugs,
Well,
illicit drugs.
And because that covers, I took like 3 Percocet before a match for my knee, and
How did it do for your trigger finger?
not so great.
Yeah.
That didn't actually do that, but
So
you can see something like that happening.
Okay, so this week's trivia question is an IDPA question. And it's a reloading question. Now, when you perform a
Very
reload,
specific reloading question.
very specific reloading question. When you perform a reload with retention or a tactical reload, that means the partially depleted ammunition device,
A moon clip.
a moon
and
clip
magazine.
that comes out of your gun, must be stowed somewhere securely as part of the reload. And the question is, if that ejected, depleted moon clip is stowed by dropping it into your holster,
You could do this with a mag as well if your
You
holster
could,
is
yeah.
set up correctly for it.
dropped into your holster, is that a legal position to stow that depleted reloading device that's been removed from the gun during the reload? So send your answers, and we'll do the usual mumbo jumbo,
And we'll
pick a
figure
winner.
out who's
So
right.
we got a week to get the correct
Yeah,
answer in.
yeah.
So
Good luck,
good luck.
and I mean that sincerely.
Sincerely.
Good luck.
So we also have an interview coming up with Chris Hodgson.
Hodgson.
And if you guys have questions for him, submit those to us on Facebook or through the email. Anything
Yeah, the email's
like
probably
that.
the best, I
Yeah.
would say, because it's
Skywriting.
correct and you have a
Smoke
recorded
signals.
copy of it or whatever of it.
Smoke
so
signals.
powerfactorshow@gmail.com would be the best thing to send it in on.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, we really appreciate your support, subscriptions. Please subscribe to the channel. We can put like a cool little subscribe to us bar down here where I'm making this hand gesture. And also, any sort of support, donations are always appreciated.
Yeah, we
as
had
well.
we had the donate button, and again, we've mentioned this before that we're in this to provide information to you guys. We're not charging for content. We never will charge for content or anything of
free,
that
and it always will
nature.
be.
It always will be free. But if you feel like you've gained something out of it or you enjoy it, it would be nice if you guys threw $1 or $2 or whatever,
Sure.
or 5.
And if you guys would give me some support for my sweater.
Right, look, this
I
thing
really
is...
appreciate it. My mom gave me this sweater.
So
My
quick.
wife said, "You're not going to embarrass me by wearing that on TV, are you?"
If you
Please,
guys...
just give me some love for the sweater.
So-
If you guys donate
If you like-
$100, we'll burn his sweater on an upcoming episode.
Mom gave me that.
So,
you don't wanna do that.
like Rick's sweater on Facebook or
Yes.
like it on YouTube.
Yes.
We'll burn it on TV. No, we won't.
And send your answers into powerfactorshow@gmail.com for the trivia question. That's the best place.
And obviously, the other way to get a hold of us is at the website, powerfactorshow.com. And there's another one that has to do with Facebook.
Yeah,
and I think
Rick, what's the
should
Facebook
answer that.
How's that
address?
I have no idea.
It's lazy. It's facebook.com/powerfactorshow.
How hard is that to remember? I mean,
I'll write it on the back of my hand.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah. We'll see you later. That's Facebook's.
Thanks for watching, guys.
see ya.
Thanks. Bye.